Today I'm going to show you how to build your own cathode ray tube TV wall, including where to source the TVs from, how to stack them into a wall, and how to send them video, including how to control them remotely so that you can send different video signals to different TVs, and some tips about what types of TVs you should look for and what you should avoid. In terms of sourcing your TVs, I think Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist are probably your best options. A lot of times you can find them for free. If you need them on a short notice, you can probably expect to pay between $20 and $40 per television. Some of these I got for free that people were throwing out, like this massive Trinitron over here. Others that are a little harder to find, like this teeny tiny color Watchman, which is a 5-inch television. That one was off eBay and cost about $100. So while it's possible to use pretty much any CRT in your TV wall, there are some ones that have more favorable characteristics that make it better for the job. And if I had to pick from all of these various TVs that I've come to acquire over the past couple years, I think in terms of which would be the ideal TV, I would probably pick this one right here, and I'll show you why. So there are several reasons why I would choose this JVC television as the ideal CRT to be looking out for if you're trying to acquire your own to stack into a TV wall. First of all, if you look at it straight on, you can see there's not a bunch of extra space at the bottom. It is relatively square. And so when all the TVs are lit up, it'll have more surface area of the glass relative to the size of the body. And as an example of one that does not meet that very well, you can see this one here. It has a much larger bottom part. Of course, the bonus is you get a DVD and VHS player, although I do warn you, the VHS player on these older TVs is oftentimes not working. And even if it does work, it can break very easily because it hasn't been used in a long time. The DVDs also tend to have issues. It's just more mechanical parts that can fail. But you can see when that television is on, there's like 25% of it at the bottom there that is essentially going to take away from the amount of surface area that you will be getting. One of the other reasons why this is an ideal TV to be on the lookout for is, if you notice on the back, it has a composite video input, which is the yellow one right there, which you are probably familiar with. Having it on the rear means that there is no cables to plug in on the front, which again contributes to it having a cleaner appearance. All of the TVs are pretty much guaranteed to have coaxial, and that was used for UHF and VHF analog television stations. So just like flipping through the channels of the TV, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like that would all come through there. Whereas the composite ones are always their own separate input on the TV, which makes it more stable. Composite video is slightly higher quality than modulated through RF. Unless your laptop is 15 years old, it's not going to have a composite output on it. So the question is, how can you use a modern digital output like HDMI and send that to the older standard of composite video? Luckily, it is super simple. You just need a converter like this. You can find these on Amazon for less than $10 or AliExpress for like $2. They have an HDMI on one side for the input and composite and stereo RCA audio on the other side. So I'll show you how to hook this up to a modern computer. Okay, so we'll start by turning the TV on. Great. And if it says video, then you know you're on the composite input. And we have the converter plugged into the HDMI port of my computer. And then I just need to plug in composite output. And now we'll see my screen is actually mirrored, which is not what we want. If that happens by default for you, on Windows at least, you just go into your system display settings and click extend these displays. All right, so now it's just a black screen right now. So let's send it some video. There are a lot of different ways to send video from your computer. In this case, we're using my software, Nuvotion. So if we go to output and macro silicon, which is what it's identified in the display properties, I'll go ahead and click that. And you can see the visuals are now being output from Nuvotion onto your CRT. And a great tip to be aware of is that normally these come with a mini USB power. It's actually not necessary because it can get the power it needs to do the conversion from the HDMI power bus. So I can go ahead and unplug this. It's still working. And so I would consider the cord as completely optional. It could help with the stability of the signal, especially for really long HDMI runs, but in general, I would say it's not necessary. Now that we have a digital video input to our CRT, kind of a fun thing you can... Oh, slight interruption due to the flooding here. This is maybe one reason why it's not always the best idea to keep your TV wall in your basement, but let's hope we get lucky here. I moved most of them out of the path of the water, so hopefully that'll be good enough. So now that the tornado is over, power is back on, and I've cleaned up all the water, I can show you this little side tangent about glitch gear. This is the Mismatcher Petite by Freedom Enterprises based in Portugal. And there are shops like this all over the world that create this glitch gear. In this case, it has a couple different features. I'm going to show you the enhancer, which has a couple different knobs you can play with to glitch out the image. You can see as I turn the one knob, it sort of destabilizes it. And if I turn the other, it adjusts the texture. It is possible for it to cut out, and that happens when you've corrupted the sync signal of Composite. There are ways to prevent that. It is sort of a big rabbit hole, and so I'll tell you more about that in a future video. But let's get that back under control here. Just bring it up slightly, and we can focus on the cool part, which is the different textures. So yeah, like I said, I'll make a future video about that. But this is one of the advantages to using analog video and CRTs, is this really unique texture where you can see by passing the signal through this specialized circuitry, it will sort of glitch it out in unique and interesting ways, which play extremely well with the phosphor patterns of the screen. All right, so I removed the mismatcher from the signal chain, so we're back to a clean signal. And I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm actually sort of squeezed in. If you compare it to the digital source, that looks pretty normal, right? And if I go ahead and put a circle in there, but I go back over here to the CRT and it's an egg, which could be a problem, right? You don't want all your content squeezed inward. And the reason why that's happening is these cheap converters, they always take a 69 input and convert it to Composite, which is 4:3. So you're going from the digital widescreen standard to the full screen standard. And there's no setting you can adjust in the conversion process so that it compensates for that. And by the way, if you notice it's changing color, that's nothing I'm doing. That is just one of the quirks of filming CRTs, and I will go into that more in a future video. This problem always bothered me when the aspect ratio stretching issue. And I even invested in, professional type equipment that is used more in sort of a broadcast scenario. This bottom one, $100, this one, $100 on eBay. It's also, not easy to come by. And at the end of the day, through all my testing, I found that it doesn't work any better at all. And so the solution I found to this problem is you can continue using the, $2 to $10 ubiquitous converters that everybody has. And then you handle the adjustment through digital scaling. So for example, in Nuvotion, you can adjust the entire composition settings at once, and I can adjust the scale of the image. And so back over here, you can see I can adjust it until it is a circle. And that is definitely by far the easiest fix that I found to do this. So that if I go ahead and switch back to a camera feed, you can see, now I actually look normal. Whether you're using Nuvotion or Resolume or OBS, they all have ways to compensate for the scaling of the output. It's just a lot easier to rely on digital processing and use these cheap converters, which the quality is actually there. They work completely fine. And if they were to break, they're very easy to replace. And quickly, let me mention 2 more reasons why I think this JVC is kind of the ideal form factor to look for if you're trying to acquire your own CRTs. So first of all, the top is almost completely flat, which makes it great for stacking. It's also got a pretty decent amount of surface to do that. And you might think, well, look how deep these TVs are. Wouldn't it just fall back if you tried to stack another one on top? No, actually, because they are very front heavy. The tube is the heaviest part. And so you definitely can stack another TV or maybe even a third one on top of that with this amount of surface area. Although there are ways to increase the stability. One other thing you might not think is immediately important, but actually can make a big difference if you're planning on renting out your TV walls or moving them to different venues and locations for installations, is these have handles. Not everyone has handles. It can be very heavy. The Trinitron back here is 225 pounds, so that's not going anywhere. Handles are not really. This one is maybe only 45 pounds. If you're trying to bring it to a venue, this is definitely doable. You can walk it up and down stairs as one person. So again, this is the type to look out for. So I went ahead and stacked another CRT on top of the JBC. So that kind of shows off that, yes, you can totally stack these if you get the right ones. What if you want to send video to the top TV as well? Your first inclination might be, oh, just use a splitter. Here's an example of that. It is RCA male on one side and 2 females on the other. So that should just split the signal and send it to both TVs. And it totally will. Let me show you what happens, though, when we do. Okay, at first glance, it seems to be working, right? You are getting a signal on both TVs. But what may be a little hard to tell from the camera is there are sort of horizontal lines now appearing in the signal, and it is slightly dimmer. So it's not an ideal way to do it, but if you only needed 2 TVs, it seems like that could work just fine. But you can't just continue splitting it. Otherwise, it will get dimmer and dimmer until eventually all the TVs will lose signal. If your video wall only consists of 8 TVs and they're all showing the identical image, something like this could be a good option. It basically just takes a composite video signal and splits it into 8 identical signals so that you won't have that problem where if you were just continue splitting the same signal passively, you'd start losing power on the TVs. This can definitely do that. You can find these for, about $20 on Amazon. That could be an option, but I'm going to go on to show you a really much more interesting one very soon. And anyway, showing the same image on every TV, that could be kind of boring. Let's first talk about how it's possible to show multiple images on multiple TVs simultaneously from the same computer, which is something you might want to do. Most computers only have one HDMI output. Some only have USB-C. And in either case, the solution is to use USB-C on one side, HDMI on the other. So you can just plug that into your computer's USB-C port, and that will give you an extra display. And then you can go ahead and use another one of these HDMI to composite converters, and now you'll have 2 independent signals. Now you can see that I have 2 different HDMI to composite converters going. One plugged into the HDMI port of the computer, one into a USB-C adapter, and that does let us have 2 simultaneous images from the same computer. Now things do get a little more complicated on the software side. For example, if you're using Nuvotion or OBS, those currently only allow you to do a single output at the same time, single screen output. So in my case, I just opened 2 instances of the program. The same can be done in OBS. If you have something like Resolume or certain other live performance software, a lot of times they have multiple display output options, which can definitely come in handy, so you don't need to open the program twice. And you may be asking, well, what if I want to have a unified image across both of them? If it was a person, like their torso and body would be up there and their legs would be down there. That's also definitely possible, and I will be showing that in the next video. In this video, I'm just going to show how to send multiple video sources to multiple TVs and then dynamically route them. So I've already showed you the ideal TV that I have from this collection, but what about one of the ones that I would recommend against, or some signs to avoid when you're picking up your own CRTs? Well, this one looks pretty good at the surface. It is significantly bigger, which means heavier. And the way that these TVs work is they essentially get exponentially heavier when the screen gets bigger. So this one is very, very difficult to carry as one person. You definitely need 2 people to carry it upstairs. I was able to get it up on the table myself, but beyond that, kind of difficult. Contributing to that difficulty is the fact that it has no handles at all, and there's not even any spot to grip it other than the bottom. So you have to get your fingers under there and try to lift it up. So ones like this suck. So another problem I had with this TV is the composite input doesn't work. And a lot of times you may come across older TVs from the 70s and 80s. A lot of time they have wood grain, and that's how you can sort of tell. Those don't have composite input sometimes. like I said, you can still use them, but in that case, whether you have one of the older style ones that only have RF input, or your composite input isn't working, which actually is the case for two of my TVs, you need one of these RF modulators. That basically just converts a composite input into RF and then puts it on one of the channels of the TV. And normally they let you select between channel 3 and 4. Yeah, in general, this is a big TV that's hard to carry without a working composite input. So if it doesn't have composite, I don't think I would pick it up unless you are willing to accept that you will probably need an RF modulator, which is not only an extra cord to plug in, but also an extra power to plug in. And that can start getting problematic when you have 16 TVs to plug in. One more tip for the RF modulators is, rather than having them sort of just floating free and plugging them in every time, letting them hang out behind the TV, it's best to secure them to the TV. And I did that through dual lock Velcro. And I go through so much of this stuff because it comes in handy for keeping things securely connected. It doesn't ever degrade, which is nice. It has a very strong grip to it. So yeah, I can just flip that on there and it's not going anywhere. Last thing to point out about why this is not a good TV to get, this style of TV, is you can see there's just no way you could stack anything on that. It basically just curves immediately. So this TV, it's just not ideal. And like I said, there are ways that you can stack any TV, and I'll get to that method in a future video. For this video, I'm going to be showing you how to do it with steel shelving. And you can get this type of stuff from Home Depot between maybe like $100 and $300, depending on how big it is. And you just get these steel shelving components that you can slot together without any tools, and it is able to support the weight of heavy CRTs. So one thing I recommend, especially if you're going to be moving the TVs, is to put cable ties on all of the power cords. And the way you do that is you loop it through so that it stays attached to the cord. And then the way to wrap the cord is like this. Don't just like wrap it around your hand or your arm. You kind of follow the natural way that it is coiling. Go like that, and then wrap it around. So now when you're moving this up and down stairs, you're not tripping on the cord. If you need to plug in 16 TVs, you're going to need at least 16 composite video cords. That can sort of get expensive. You don't want to be paying $5 a cord or something like that. And by the way, you don't have to use yellow. Any RCA cord can carry composite video. So what I found is the cheapest way to acquire a good number of these cords is go on eBay and look for multi-packs of these red, white, and yellow RCA cables that are 10 feet long and, importantly, are fused together like this so that you can separate them out. So now I have an extra wire. And by doing it this way, you can get the cost down to like 20 cents a wire. Here's an example of a 10-foot one, and that's long enough normally to be used for a whole wall. So again, just take the cable tie, make sure it's captive to the cable, wrap it over and under itself. There you go. And you could even leave this plugged into the back of the TV or the matrix, which we'll get to. So it'll save you a lot of time, and I recommend load out, load in. It doesn't leave unless it's wrapped. So let's go ahead and build the actual wall now. So it took Ricky and I about an hour to finish constructing the TV wall. Most of the power is routed through the center on the bottom right here. All of the video is. The other power is routed through this power conditioner, which we're going to tuck in behind there. And then the space in between these two TVs is where the matrix controller is going to go. And that's going to essentially be the way that video gets distributed throughout the wall. And that's going to be the next thing I show you how to build. So your first inclination might be to go on Amazon and buy a couple of these composite video splitters, which takes one input and splits it into 8 identical outputs. And maybe you could get 2 of these so you could send video to all 14 of the TVs or however many you have. And that's fine, but they would all be sharing the same video signal, which isn't always the most interesting to look at. And maybe you have 2 of these and you send them each different video signals. That's also fine, but the limitation there is every TV will always show the same video. And so what if you want something a little more dynamic? That's where a matrix switcher comes in. So unlike a simple splitter like I showed you before, a matrix switcher can let you route any of the 16 inputs to any of the 16 outputs in any combination, and then let you save those different routing combinations as presets. So for example, I could click on input 1, and you can see it's currently routed to all 16 outputs. So every TV would be showing the same thing. But I could choose to say, let's make input 2 on every other TV, hit enter. So now you can see input 1 is going to the odd ones, and input 2 is going to the even ones. And then, so you could save that as a preset by holding down that until it begins blinking. And we could say that's preset 1. That'll blink. Enter. And then we could try maybe a different routing combination where we choose to send 1 to TVs 1 through 8, right? And then send input 2 to 9 through 16. So 1, 2. And then we can save that as a preset. We'll put that on 2. Enter. So then if we want to trigger those presets at any time, I could do preset 1. Enter. So now we see. So turning the unit around, you can see we have quite a lot of connectors on the back. And these are actually not RCA connectors. So you see, can't plug that in. These are B and C connectors. And they are a locking form of connector, more common in professional video. And if you ever worked with SDI, SDI commonly uses B and C as well. But it is just the connector. The signal itself can be composite, like it is in this case. If you're wondering why it says Y inputs and C inputs, is because Y is for luminance and C is for chrominance. And sometimes you put those through one cable, but 2 different wires on the same cable. If you've ever seen S-video, that's how it works. So this is essentially an S-video switcher. But if you want to use it for composite, you just ignore the second row. So we're just going to use this top row, and we're going to start by adapting all of the B and C inputs to RCA so that we can plug it in with our RCA equipment. So you can see now that I have fitted 5 of the B and C inputs with RCA adapters, so we can plug our RCA cords in just fine. And I've done that for all 16 of the outputs. I think realistically, there's no way I'm going to use more than 5 inputs for this particular wall. We definitely could use 16 outputs, so that's how I have it wired here. If you notice in the bottom right-hand corner, you see a 9-pin connector, which is for sending RS-232 signals. That's something you may have not come across, but it essentially allows you to send remote control signals to the unit and trigger routing or different presets. So the way that we can remotely control the matrix switcher is using one of these USB to serial interfaces. And essentially it allows your computer to send RS-232 signals over USB. And so we're essentially going to plug that in right here. But in order to do so, we'll need one of these cords just so that it can plug in properly. So you can see I will insert that here and then connect the other female end to here. There we go. And then you just plug that into your computer. And then now your computer is essentially able to do what we were doing earlier, where it's triggering the different routing combinations. Now, depending on how far your computer is from the Matrix controller, this may be good enough for you. Again, you just plug it in your computer and you're able to control it. But what if, for example, you were 50 feet away from the wall? Well, you could get a 50-foot RS-232 serial cable, but something that might be a little bit better of an option is actually to adapt the serial 9-pin input into Cat5. So you can see we have serial on one end and Cat5 on the other end. The reason why you might want to do this is it's a lot easier and cheaper to do long Ethernet runs than it is buying special RS-232 cables to do the same. So I'll show you how to wire that up now. So here's the best way that you can do very long runs. I would say 50 to maybe 300 feet. This is a good way to do it. So you see we have a RS-232 to Cat5 adapter, have a 50-foot Cat5 cable here that then gets adapted back into serial, goes into the serial, the USB adapter, plug this into your computer, and then you can trigger presets remotely. In order to power all of your TVs in your wall, I can definitely recommend this specific power conditioner, which is by Pyle. Usually costs between $70 and $90, and it has 19 different power connectors. There's 16 on the rear, and they are flexible, which really helps in routing the cables. You have 3 on the front, you have a power switch, and then you have 4 USB ports, which can also really come in handy sometimes. In the past, I have run long RCA cords to the inputs from across the room and adapted them to HDMI using these converters on the other end. This time around, I want to do something a little bit differently. I think I'd like to secure these adapters like this on the top of the unit so that essentially I can plug in HDMI here and it'll just send composite video to the inputs here. So that's one thing I want to do a little bit differently this time around, but there are multiple ways about going about it. So I'm actually going to go ahead and remove these adapters I put on. And again, for your setup, maybe you do want those there. That's totally valid. And instead, I have these short BNC cables. I'll plug those into input 1 and 2. And just like we were able to convert BNC to RCA, we can do the same BNC here to RCA on this end using these adapters. All right, so using dual lock Velcro and the BNC cords, we now have 2 HDMI inputs to input 1 and 2 here, and we'll be able to route those to any of the 16 outputs. You may have noticed that both the matrix switcher and power conditioner are rack-mounted units, which means they have rack ears that allow you to screw them in to a rack case, the one I have right here. So the plan is basically to screw both of these units into the case, which not only makes it more portable, it also just makes it easier to route cables and makes it more self-contained and also provides some level of protection. So now both units are mounted to the rack case. You can see on the back that the power connectors are slightly coming out of the back, but that's okay. We should be able to close the case and zip it shut properly. This is about 12 inches deep. And we have 1 extra rack unit space, which is perfect to store the cables away like that. Also giving room for the HDMI to composite adapters. So pretty good setup. I think if you are aiming for something similar, that 5 rack units is a good size to aim for your case. I've grabbed a couple long HDMI cords that I have laying around and don't use that often. I think that would be perfect for these. They're 35 feet each, and you have all the powers, all the TV video inputs, and we are ready to connect it to our new wall controller. right, so we have every single TV showing a no signal. You think that would be a bad thing, but it actually means that all of the HDMI converters are actually producing a signal. So all we have to do now is just plug in the HDMI cords that we ran to the wall. Okay, and then I'll plug in input number 2 as well. Okay, so I have 2 instances of Nuvotion running, and I have Matrix, which is the Matrix Switch controller software I created, all running together. At the moment, Nuvotion only is capable of a single output, and Matrix is a separate program. I definitely intend soon to integrate them all into one program, so you'll be able to control the Matrix directly from Nuvotion, and Nuvotion will be capable of multiple outputs simultaneously, so you won't have to do this in this way. Although if you're using OBS, it is similar. In order to have 2 outputs, you will need to open 2 instances of OBS, as far as I know, and other software like Resolume already supports multiple simultaneous outputs, but you will still need the Matrix software, and that'll all be linked in the description. Let's go ahead and send this one to Macro Silicon on input 1. And there you go. Video's coming through just fine. And we will go ahead and send output from the second instance of Nuvotion to the other display. And so all I need to do to dynamically, remotely route all the TVs to that second input is just go over here and click all. There we go. So now you can see they're all running input 2. And the fun thing is we can mix and match them. So I can go ahead and just kind of at random Now you can see roughly every other TV is showing different inputs. If you want to make it easier on yourself, you can name the inputs. Top, this one, bottom, and that just refers to the top and bottom instances of Nuvotion. And I could go ahead then and save that as a preset just by clicking the save button here. And you see that'll save that as number 1. So we have that saved as a preset. And then I can go in and alternate the inputs. So I'm just going to flip them all. So now input 1 and 2 are flipped. They're going to the opposite TVs. And I could save that as preset number 2. And to trigger those presets, you can either hit apply or you can just use the arrow keys as long as you have the matrix window focused. So I'll just go ahead and hit 2. 1, 2. So that's a great way to remotely dynamically route which video signals are going to which TV, and you can do it very fast. It works just fine. Now, one kind of interesting thing to note is if I go ahead and zoom in on one of these TVs, you'll watch that as it flips, the video kind of like does a little slideshow effect where it goes kind of like top to bottom. And that is one thing to be aware of with this method, is that it is not perfectly a seamless instant cut. It kind of has this sort of jumpy look to it. But you know what, to be honest, I kind of like that look. I think it kind of feeds into the sort of glitchy aesthetic of these consumer TVs arranged in a wall like this. So I don't mind it. I think it looks pretty cool. One option for routing the TVs is to very carefully make sure certain TVs are plugged into certain outputs of the matrix. But I prefer to just handle that with software through trial and error, which is still practical with a wall of this size. So for example, if I maybe want to have this middle row right here and then all these on the right side be input 2, then I'll just go one by one through the list. And if it's not the TV I want, I just flip it right back. And so I could just save that as preset 5. And then an easy way to get kind of sort of a free preset is just to go through then and invert all of those. Save that as 6. So I could do 1, every other, 2, flip it, 3, left half is input 1, right half is input 2, or vice versa. Flip those, you can go back and forth, sort of. So that's the power of using Matrix for your routing presets and remotely controlling them. It is a much more dynamic experience than only having the same input going to every TV, or it just simplifies a lot of things to have it be a live performance tool rather than pre-recorded video. You have fully dynamic content and fully dynamic routing. So yeah, it's kind of a pretty powerful setup. I really like the ability to not only dynamically route it, but because it's running live visuals programs like Nuvotion, I could very easily just go through and, for example, on input 1, top input, the red one, I can just add a quad effect, just like that. Or I could take input 2, do a tunnel effect. So yeah, you do definitely have the option of just opening OBS and sending a static video on repeat. And, if you are doing that, then I think dynamically switching could add a great level of making it more dynamic. But, why not have the best of both worlds and have live controlled video as well? Okay, so I already know what you're asking. What if I want to have one unified image across the entire thing? I want to have a fish swim from this TV to this TV to this TV to this TV and back around. That is definitely possible, and I have a solution for that. It's just not going to be covered in this video. That will be a future video coming very soon. I actually have a custom-made product in the work for that I'm actually going to be selling on my website that really makes that as easy as it has ever been. Because one issue with that is that, at least in 2024, there's just no off-the-shelf solution to map one giant image to a TV wall. But like I said, I have the answer. You'll just have to be a little bit patient, and that will be in a coming video. Thanks for watching my tutorial on how to build your very own video wall and to send video to it using a Matrix controller powered by Nuvotion and my Matrix software. If you have any questions on how you'd like to create a setup like this for yourself, please leave a comment. I made this video to help you, to help more people build this. I hope this inspires a whole generation of artists to go out trash picking some of these and build their own wall. Or if you just something you've always wanted to do as a backdrop for a music video or art installation or at your concert. I have a couple of years of doing this all the wrong ways and definitely picked up some lessons along the way. So hopefully you picked up on some of those. If you want to replicate this approach for your TV wall, then I actually have 4 of these for sale that you could buy. And not only is it the Matrix controller, it is also the kit needed to control it remotely and all of the BNC to RCA adapters already pre-installed. You'll just get a box containing pretty much everything you need in terms of video. And, the rest is up to you in terms of power and putting it in a box and everything. But you can just connect it to your computer, use my Matrix software to control it, and use Nuvotion to send video to it or whatever your favorite video program is. So yeah, buy 1, buy 2. Don't buy them all because other people probably want them. So next time we will be talking about how to have one contiguous image show across all the different screens. It's a little more difficult. It requires a different approach, not a Matrix controller. But even though it is really cool to be able to do that, I think that this is a great starter approach. It is significantly cheaper than the other method as well. This is just a great way to power TV and keep it dynamic. Stupid. What should I have to say?